Hey, Dethroners, welcome back to the Dethroning Your Inner Critic podcast. I am really excited for our conversation today. I have Kim Muench with us today. She is a parenting coach. If you have not heard her on Instagram, she is absolutely extraordinary. And she is a parenting coach who believes that the quality of the relationship between ourselves and our children is the essence of what it will take to create positive change in the world, not only during our lifetime, but for future generations as well. You are absolutely speaking my language. That is brilliant. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, Joanna, I'm very excited to have this conversation with you today and the opportunity to speak to your audience about such an important topic.
So important. Yes, I was reading a little bit about you. And what I love is that you said something about your own journey with parenting your emerging adult children, and that you had to make space for your own physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. You had to make that a priority, and that's what led you on the path to parenting from a completely different perspective. So I would love to hear, how did you discover making that, the importance of making that a priority in your life?
That's a really good question. I think it was probably through a series of events. So in May of 2008, my oldest son, who at the time was 20 years old, called me from across the country. He was living across the country from us and said to me, I lost the last 3 days of my life to an alcohol binge, and I need help. And while my mom instinct knew that he had had some kind of mental health issues during high school years, some depression, whatnot, I didn't
Yeah.
have any idea of
Yes.
what I was dealing with. And I didn't at that time even know how big a problem it was. But that, I would say, is the precipitous to my personal awakening and parenting wake-up call. Both of
Yep.
those things happened within the journey of walking with him through addiction and into long-term recovery. And it caused me to look back at my own parenting and the way that I had been parented, and bring to mind. Of course, I was trying to be a conscious parent to my 5 kids, but I wasn't, I don't think, being as intentional. And I didn't understand the connection between how important it was for me to take care of myself and work on my emotional life in the process of raising them.
Yes. That is, I think, what so many moms, parents really don't understand, is that really the key to being the parent that we want to be resides in our own inner work.
Yes.
And yep. And as I've been a therapist for almost 30 years. And the parenting of my 3 children is really the catalyst that served as the most important reflection of what I had not yet healed. And I had done a lot of personal growth work over the years, but in my experience, there is nothing like parenting that really shows you the parts of yourself that you might still be blind to.
And I wouldn't have understood that as a young mother. I don't know that I would have got that. I hope that the millennial moms and the Gen Z I hope that those moms, I think there's more emotional awareness and intelligence at this point, that I think they'll get it earlier. But I don't know that I would have understood my children as my greatest teachers and my greatest awakeners when they were little, when I was a new mom. Like I just don't think I would have. My goal as a new mom was, and this was for years, right? To get to do all the things that needed to be done, to make sure everyone was on a schedule, to make sure we were supposed to be, all of those things. And it's a very busy time. It's very physically demanding when you're a parent of young children. It's only, I think, sometimes when they get to be an older age, when we're not so needing to be so, they're more independent, right? We might mentally worry about them, but they're more independent. And so it's not so time consuming, that I think we understand and we can take a step back and look at motherhood as a way to really grow ourselves up.
Absolutely. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about motherhood as a way of growing ourselves up, because I think that a lot of people don't really fully understand that distinction. So can you elaborate on that a little bit from your perspective?
Yes. Okay, so hopefully this will be a good connection. I'm gonna go back to when I found out my son was addicted to alcohol. I had him at 18. I had that son at 18. And as a result of that, I was asked to leave my family home. So I was pregnant, and my parents were like, you can't have that baby and stay here. So if you're going to keep the baby, you need to, find your own place. So I went on welfare, and I went through a whole bunch of stuff. And when 20 years later, when that son called me with a predicament that he was in that was huge, I consciously thought to myself, how did my parents respond when I was an emerging adult and I was in a crisis situation?
Yes.
Now, my mom is my greatest cheerleader, but she did stand with my dad at the time on my needing to leave home because she didn't want to go up against him. So bottom line, so 20 years later, here I am in a situation with my own son, and I consciously am saying to myself, what did my parents not do for me
Yes.
that I really needed at the time, which was, to be emotionally supportive of me
Yes.
in that time. And so I didn't want to, but I also, thank God, for some reason, did not go so far over to emotionally support my son that I enabled him. So I recognized what I didn't get, and what I didn't get was the emotional support I needed in that moment. But I think that I could have overdone that and gotten to a place where I was giving my son money and bailing him out of jail and doing all the things that would have enabled the situation to take much longer for him to find sobriety.
Yes. So,
So
yeah, sorry, go ahead, please.
like I think our kids do present to us in their lifetimes. It may not look exactly the same, right? Like it may not, but I think that they show us and give us the ability in situations that they're in to reflect back to us where we can make a different choice or where we can learn and grow from.
Yes. Yes. So I know you took the inner critic assessment. There are 5 inner critics that I talk about. I have 3 out of the 5. Mine are perfectionist, inadequate, and restless. So what I can see for myself is that when my oldest son started exhibiting signs of social anxiety, right? Issues of social isolation, I immediately went inward to myself. And I said, what is it that I'm not doing? Or what is it that I haven't done as a mom such that this is showing up for him? Which then had me completely over functioning for him, right? I wanted to fix it. I wanted to make it go away. I wanted to get him back to being happy, being fulfilled. Now, absolutely, I wanted to do that because I love him and because I wanted his life to work out, right? But what I didn't realize is what was really also lurking below the surface for me is my own my own inadequacy, right? My own belief that it was my own inadequacy as a mother that was creating this. And in turn, I caused his anxiety to become worse, right?
Yes, this
That
happens all the time.
all the time, right? And like you said, I mean, that was one of the catalysts for me that had me go inward and really need to sort of confront what's under my own perfectionism and my own inadequacy and my own inner desire for, right? I needed my children to kind of be a certain way. And it, for me, it wasn't, I didn't need them to have good grades. I needed them to have decent grades, but I didn't need them to be perfect in the, society standards. My perfectionism was I needed them to be happy because after all, I'm a therapist, right? This is what
Mm.
I've devoted my life to, is making sure that people feel good and my own children don't feel good. And it just
Right.
stirred up all this stuff. So you see that a lot with the parents that
Yeah,
you
well, I see
yeah,
that in a lot of my clients. So I see a lot of moms. I see a lack of confidence in them, especially when they're young adults or so I specifically work with parents of emerging adults 18 to 29.
yeah,
And many of them are walking the same path I once did with my son, whether it's mental health and or addiction issues.
yeah,
So these are parents that feel like failures. And I will go back to my story for just a second to say, I remember when Nick was walking through this, my son was walking through this, and being conscious about where I had contributed, because I had
yeah,
contributed to where didn't make the choice to put the drink, but I had contributed to it. And this is where I think parents get stuck. They get stuck in what they did or didn't do to contribute to the problem with their young adult.
yes,
I didn't do that. I accounted for, but I didn't get stuck there. Because I thought the guilt, the fear, all the things, this is not going to be productive. My kid is like on a self-destructive path. And
yes.
if I sit in this anxiety and this guilt and whatever, this is not going to serve him. This is not going to serve me. So what can I do?
Mhm.
And part of what can I do, the answer to that was really, how can I take good care of myself so I can continue to be this strong, focused, emotionally available person to my son?
Yes, yes. So let's talk about taking care of yourself, because that's also something that I think many people don't understand, right? People think, oh, well, taking care of myself is, exercising and eating right and making sure that I take time for myself. And that's all important. But there was something that you mentioned about a spiritual component that I think is really crucial here. That I think a lot of people miss the mark. And the spiritual component is about understanding that which you really have no control over. Really understanding what you do have control over and what you don't have control over. So
Yes.
where do you see that in your work with people?
So, in one of the darkest moments of my son's active addiction, I would go to bed at night and all the rest of the kids were asleep. My husband was snoring, and I would finally allow myself to have some feelings about the frickin' shoe could drop at any moment with my oldest son, right? So
Um,
I would often cry myself to sleep. And I didn't have a dream this particular night, but I did wake up with the sense and knowing, and I wish I could gift this to every parent walking through this, but
yeah.
I woke up with the sense and knowing and the liberation of the understanding that I didn't know why Nick was here in the world. I
Mm.
knew I didn't have any control over it. I knew at that point because I had tried so many things to try and keep him out of jail or off the roads or what, like so many things. I had no control over it. But knowing I didn't know why he was here and I didn't know what he might have to evolve through or experience, in order to whatever his soul's goal was, or there could be more than one, right? But it wasn't all I could do. So I made a decision that all I can do is love him and support him where he's at, and never make a decision that would contribute to his self-destruction, because as his mother, I loved him. So that meant everything was filtered through, is this going to contribute to his self-destructive behavior? If it is, I will not do it.
Mm.
If bailing him out of jail is going to potentially maybe put him on the road again, where he's a danger to himself and other people, I will not bail him out of jail.
Yes. Yes. So how do you support parents in staying loving when they are so frustrated and so angry with whatever it is that their child is doing?
I think a lot of what I do in coaching is hold space.
Yes.
Parents bring a lot of emotion into frustration, fear, guilt, all of it. Like a lot of it is fear, right? Anger. So they bring these feelings in. And I think in part because I am as grounded as I am, because of the daily practices that I put into place.
Yes.
I think part of it is just releasing it through their bodies, whether it's through their mouths, or I sometimes have them write in a journal, whatever it is, to get them out, get that emotion out of them through them. I shouldn't, to get that through them. And
Yeah.
then coming up with a concrete plan that makes sense, and making sure, if I'm working with both parents, making sure that they're both confident, calm, and consistently giving the same message, because a lot of problems arise because they're getting the young adult is getting different messages, or the parent, the biggest fear, the biggest problem I have right now, the parents, they're so afraid to push too hard because their young adult has either been depressed, had self-harm in the past, attempted in the past, and they're just frozen, which is
Yes.
what, they're frozen. And that's understandable, right? Like totally understandable. Nobody wants to be that parent that would be the one that pushed too hard. And, on the other hand, it can go the totally opposite direction and
Mm.
not be helpful, because parents so they keep themselves in the same spot with this young adult who needs gently, kindly, firmly to understand that their life is worthwhile, and they have people that believe in them and that they can move forward in their lives. That's not to say with some people there is a medicine component to it and whatnot. I'm not saying that there isn't that, but it doesn't help when parents are frozen, or they're just so afraid, and they do everything for their kid that they feel that they should, in the hopes that someday this kid's gonna wake up one morning and be like, you know what, I've kind of wasted too much time. I need to get a job.
Right.
That isn't going to happen.
Yes. So you're saying that you do advocate for some natural consequences, even though some, yeah,
Absolutely. I
yeah,
mean, absolutely. And I think
mhm,
that's parents' fear that sometimes the natural consequences are very high.
yes,
I understand that. And there's no guarantee. Like my son has been 14 years sober, at almost 14 years sober at this point. There's no guarantee of that. I certainly have known many people who have lost their kids to addiction or mental health issues.
yes,
There's no guarantee.
that's right.
However, when you keep yourself in that unhealthy dynamic, you're just contributing to the problem, like if you're like, oh my gosh, I can't see my kid homeless, I can't put my kid out,
Yeah,
totally understand that, but also you're making life very comfortable for them
yes, yes,
by not doing anything. Life
that's right.
is so comfortable. Why would they change? Why, if no one is requiring, have said in a number of videos, when you take away the things that you need, you take away their purpose.
Yes,
When you do for them what they can and should be doing for themselves, you take away their purpose.
yeah. And it's not just about making them uncomfortable. See, I'm wondering if you find parents they don't want to make themselves uncomfortable.
Yes,
That is,
that's it.
yeah,
I was just going to say, this is where we're going, is
yeah,
the discomfort for themselves. And I always tell parents, when your kid is going through something really tough and difficult, the reason it's so hard for you is because you're also growing.
that's it right there. Yes. Yes. In fact, sometimes I think that comes first. A
Mhm.
parent's willingness to really examine what is getting in the way of their own growth and development, which of course, right, in my lens, that's the automatic mind that I call our inner critic, right? It's that mind that speaks to us all day, every day that we just assume is us. But really, see, this is where it can be so challenging because a lot of the ways that we think were created in our own childhood.
Yes. Yes.
So here we are trying to parent our, our young adults, but really internally, we are just children ourselves, right?
Mhm.
At most, we're adolescents, right? If you haven't done your own internal work, you're kind of stuck in a lot of places in your life, and you might not recognize that you're stuck there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, I fully agree with that. And again, see that in so many parents. And I'll say in a call, it's a new client or whatever, I'll say, how did you get here? And they'll tell me all the circumstances and things. And I'm like, that's not what I mean. Like, great, this happened in high school to him and this and all the things. I'm like, no, how did you get here? How
Yes.
did you how did you how did you contribute to this? I mean, you
Yes.
have to take, and I won't take a client who cannot look within themselves. That just doesn't make any sense. And I'm
That's,
not, there's no blame here. This does not have to do with blame. This has to do with taking ownership
yes.
and working on your stuff. I'll say to parents all the time, is that yours to work on or theirs? Don't do
Mm.
their work.
Yes, yes. Is it yours to work through or is it theirs? Okay, so how do parents distinguish that? Whose work is it?
Well, and most of the time they can tell they're like, oh, that's really not mine to be working on. I can't think of a scenario off my head, or off the top of my head, but it definitely happens where we'll be talking through it and I'm like, okay, but is that your place to be working on that or not?
Yes.
And, is that about you or is that about them? Like, let's distinct, because we get so enmeshed, especially if you've got a kid who's going, well, it doesn't matter. You can have a kid who's excelling and you can have a kid who's not doing well. And so many parents are so egoically tied to their children as a reflection of
Yes.
how they parent, who they are,
Yes. Yes.
and needing that son or daughter to meet their agenda for what they need them to be, right? You said that earlier.
That's right. That's right. So that ties in with, and I love that this is where you focus to create positive change in the world. And not only during our lifetime, but in future generations as well. So I think what you're saying is that it really all comes down to our own willingness to do our own inner growth work. Is
Mhm.
that accurate? Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And I do. So family is the foundation. We all know that. It's the foundation of everything. It's where people start, like, it's where you get your base beliefs about yourself.
Yes.
And, I often say to parents who say this kid didn't come with a manual, or like nobody talks about this, you are the manual in which your grandchildren will be raised. So what kind of book do you want to be writing? I mean,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Because there's a million parenting books in the world, and there's a lot of really good ones out there, but you are the manual on
Yes.
which your kids will raise their children. And so that's not to add pressure to parents. That's not my intention in saying that, but it's to raise awareness for the fact that we really are writing the book on how those grandkids are going to be raised.
Absolutely. Yes. So if we look at your story, getting pregnant at 18, being asked to leave your home, how, how do you think your story actually contributed to how you parented your kids and how your relationship still is with your kids now?
Ooh, that's a question that I don't think anyone's ever asked me. So my son's father and I were together the first 3 years of his life, and it was an emotionally abusive relationship that I managed to extricate myself from with a lot of work, because he like stalked me, like it was abusive, but
Yeah.
I still had to co-parent. Right. So my oldest son had a different father than the other four kids. I've been married 32 years at this point. So my oldest son going back and forth between two very different houses, two very different sets of rules was, definitely an issue. I lost track of what your question was for me.
I was just asking if we look at how you were raised and the circumstances
Yes.
that happened where you got pregnant and were asked to leave, how that influenced you as a parent and your relationship with your kids now.
Yes. So I think in general, I would say I had a very typical upbringing. I had a married parents. I have two younger brothers. We went to Catholic school, like lived in the suburbs. Like it was,
Mm-hmm.
lovely.
Yep.
Um, but I definitely didn't have an emotional attachment or connection with my dad really at
Yes.
all.
Yeah.
And I did have a decent relationship with my mom, even during the high school years. But again, she was really, really connected with my father in terms of like, I'm not going to go against him kind of thing.
Yeah.
So when my husband and I, as we have parented or as I have parented my kids, have tried to be much more. I really thought about my own childhood and what I didn't have, which again was some emotional connection. But I also knew that structure was important. I'm not sure how I knew that, but I guess I did have some structure that I think was, so in guiding my kids, it has been about letting them be who they are, not who I want or need them to be. And I
Mm.
can give you an excellent example of this. One of my sons is about to be ordained next week. And I have talked about this publicly and I've written it in my book. So I would not have chosen that for
Yes.
him.
Yep.
Um, but this is clearly his path, which is
Yes.
beautiful to see. And I will cherish in watching that when he's ordained next week. But
Yes.
it isn't something that I would have chosen for him. But it's
Mm.
not about me, right? It's about him.
Yes. Yes. And what was your focus that allowed you to see that as you were raising them? That this isn't about me. This is about honoring their path, their journey that they came into this lifetime for. How did you know that?
Well, okay. I think that so I was raised Catholic and I wasn't 100% all in, but I was raised Catholic. In 2015, I went to I don't know if you know who Dr. Shafali is.
Of course.
Shafali's
Of
okay.
course.
Okay.
Yes.
So she had her first Evolve, which I think she does every year at this point, but she had her first one. And at that conference, Neil Donald Walsh spoke. And
Mhm.
I had never known, he spoke and I bought every one of his books.
Yes.
And I was like, this is not new to me. This is me remembering. This
Mm.
is me
Yeah.
remembering what is the truth. And
He wrote
so,
Conversations with God, right? The Conversations
yeah,
with God. Yes, right.
yeah, yeah. I mean, so part of my spirit, so it wasn't, it's not like, I don't know if I can like pinpoint it to one thing. It's a desire to continue to learn and to seek the truth for myself, my truth. And my
Yeah.
truth is that our kids come through us, not for us,
Mm.
except for the lessons that they reflect to us
Yes.
during their journey in an
Yes.
effort to grow us up along the way.
Absolutely. Yes. That is that is huge. And we're not taught that, right? We're absolutely,
Right.
I don't know why we're not taught that. That is probably the most important lesson that there is of parenting, and it's not something that we're taught. Um, so can you just say a little bit more about this vision that you have for how this kind of parenting can impact the world?
When we are emotionally attuned and available to our kids, they have the ability to be heard and seen for who they are,
Mm,
not for who we want them or need them to be, right?
yes, yes.
So they can grow up with choice and latitude to
Mm,
pursue whatever it is that is there in their within their blueprint to pursue.
yes.
And they don't need to worry about us approving or disapproving because we're going to love them no matter what. And if you, I mean, we've all heard this, right? I love you unconditionally. But I knew growing, I've heard that, but I knew when I had to perform for love and acceptance. I had to behave the way my parents wanted me to behave and do and cross it off and check the marks and dot the I's and cross the T's. And then I knew I was like acceptable in my parents' eyes.
Yes. Yes. And
And yeah.
Kim, I find that in the culture that we're raising our children in now, it's worse. That we're raising them in this society where they're right, it's not just what we expect of them, right? It's the pressures of school are so much worse than when we went through school, the pressures of social media, I mean, it's so much worse now. And so I think that a lot of parents feel that it's their responsibility to get their kids to turn out, right?
Mhm.
And in doing so, in having that mentality, I think there's an epidemic amongst kids that the amount of anxiety and depression and mental health issues has skyrocketed
Mhm.
as a result. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
don't think
And
it's
I
just
think,
social media. I think it's parents feeling that they are responsible for how their kids turn out. Sorry,
yeah.
go
And
ahead.
I do, I mean, the social media is definitely a contributing factor to it. And I think we're going to, but like the systems of school and stuff I think there's so much change going on in the world. I think
Yes,
we're all now starting to see like
mm,
the things that we thought served us well are not.
absolutely.
And when you have a crisis with emerging adults, teenagers, and even young children, suicide rates, I mean, all of that is just like we have to, there's no greater wake-up call than what is going on in the world right now, especially with young adults. And they don't want to grow up. They don't want to grow up into this world that we've created. And so therefore we have to take a pause and
Yes,
again start looking at what are our priorities.
yes, yeah. Things do need to change because the truth is, I have a son that's going to be a senior in college next year, and you know, I'm kind of like, oh my God, like I don't want him to go out into the real world. It's like it can be a little rough out there trying to make it on your own and get a job. And I think that so many young adults are terrified of that.
Mhm.
How do you coach parents who have emerging adults that are terrified of really stepping into adulthood?
Well, and it's about incrementally, like small steps, like sometimes if you were to say to a very depressed young adult who is at home and not really going out into the world, you just need to get a job. Okay, that's so mind blowing that they like, okay, so we need to start with, let's say this kid also probably doesn't shower about once a week. It's about baby. steps. Like, okay, we need to, we're going to have dinner at the kitchen table. And I literally did this with a man from France. Like, he was at a point, part of it is being clear in your messaging, not coming from a place of control, but a place of
Mhm.
love and
Yeah.
confidence as a parent and
Yes.
believing in your ability. It cannot have anything to do with control. And that's where parents keep trying to come from, because we've
Yes.
been conditioned about this way for generations. And
Yes.
when you begin to realize you don't control that young adult, it's maddening for parents.
It is. It is. I know. I see
So
it
it's
all the time. Yeah. Hmm.
shifting from controlling to confident,
Yeah.
having a step-by-step small incremental plan, and
Yes.
holding space for
Yes.
those parents' feelings, like letting them come into, I'm in the Zoom all day long like this, and letting them come in and letting them vent at times and reassuring, like
Yeah.
you just, the confidence, the consistent messaging,
Yeah.
staying calm.
Yeah.
All of these things are going to help you help them move forward. But when you come from control and frustration, it just, and the reality is young adults today are 5 years behind where we were.
For
We were
sure.
getting married and whatnot at 22, 23, 24. They're
Yes.
not.
Nope.
They're not financially established until 5 years at least later than we were. So it
Right.
frustrates parents because they're like, oh my gosh, I've been paying for this kid forever. So it's about incrementally handing them both physical and financial responsibility for their lives.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. It's a lot. It sounds like it's a lot of focus on letting go in some ways, letting
Mhm.
go of that tight grip that sometimes we don't recognize we're kind of holding on to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. If you have, right, if you have one or two pieces of wisdom that you think are crucial for my listeners to hear, what would you say that they are?
I would love to reiterate the quote that was downloaded to me. That is the last page of my book, which again is our children come through us, not for us,
Mm.
except for the lessons they reflect to us
Yes.
during their journey in an effort to grow us up along the way. So I will say to parents, what is this situation with your son or daughter trying to teach you? Trying to
Mm.
teach you about you, trying
Yes,
to teach you about life in general.
that's right. Perfect. That's beautiful. This has been a
And
wonderful conversation. We could probably talk for hours about this subject. Where can my listeners find more about you, your book, your all of the
all of the
programs that
things,
you
yes.
offer? Yes.
So, I'm on social media at Kim Muench Parent Coach on both Instagram and TikTok. My book is available on Amazon, and the title of the book is Becoming Me While Raising You, A Mother's Journey to Herself. And my website is reallifeparentguide.com.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for your incredible wisdom today. This was a really great conversation.
I enjoyed it too. Thank you so much for having me.